All right, here we go. Hey, gang. I'm going to wait just a few seconds for people to start coming in here. This is episode 2 of the voiceover livecast. Looks like I'm live. Well, hello, Lori English. You're the first one. That's pretty special. I wasn't really running a contest or anything, but you are here first. That's got to mean something. I'm the only one. So, oh, Richard, there you are. I wonder how many rowdies we can get in here. Okay, so I'm not going to wait too long, but basically, I had some people asking me some questions about the booth and if I work from home and all that kind of stuff. Yes, I do. So we're looking at what's essentially, for the last several years, been my music room, kind of a music staging area, because I just drop all my equipment in here from the garage and load and unload at will. So this is the booth. It's a Studio Bricks, a custom 4x5 unit, 4x5 feet on the inside. The default units are 3x3, and I'm not necessarily claustrophobic, but given that I do the music as well, I really needed something I could fit my guitar in, and so I got a little bigger. And we set this thing up, and it was kind of a monster, but it's pretty unique. It's kind of almost fits together like Legos. Things just kind of you stack it on here, and there's pegs and things. There's no screws or nails in this part of it. Studio Bricks. All right, then we can go in the booth. This is the only piece that I really need to replace, this old stool. Sometimes it's a bit creaky. At the very least, I need some new upholstery. So here we go. There's lots of nice padding, which insulates the sound and just gives it a nice non-echoey thing. There's some bass traps in there, which I tried to go without, but my voice was just kind of booming over the top here, so that kind of took care of that. As we step in, you can already hear it's a little bit different. I'll close the door in a minute. Let's see. I just reconfigured this whole thing. Got myself a new monitor, and I'm kind of excited about it because I was using 2 monitors. It's going to wake up for me. Doubles as a padded room, well, that's for sure. You wouldn't believe the time I have to spend in here. So, yeah, I don't know if that'll focus, but I essentially got a 32-inch monitor, which at first seemed like overkill, but I've actually managed to get my windows arranged in the perfect way for all these projects, where it's been great. And I moved my laptop out of the booth, just because it's about a 6-year-old laptop, and it works fine, it functions fine, but made some fan noise, and that was getting a little worse. So down here, we have the warm preamp. That's what I plug the microphone into, and then that goes into the Scarlett Focusrite interface. A little dark down here. But those are just kind of essential parts to smooth out the voice, to get some power behind it. And I have the E100S microphone. Very unique little thing. It doesn't look like your standard mic, but it's been great for my voice. You kind of have to get lucky with these things. And then, so for all the cost involved in getting this set up, this little $15 pop screen is really essential and does an amazing job of just taking away the plosives from your P's and B's, I guess. Yeah, you have to have that. So I go into my booth and I hide. And then you hear the sound. Hang on a second. Matches. There we go. Dawn, mostly it's audiobooks. I do commercials occasionally. Kind of trying to do more of that. But at this point, I'm really staying busy with books. And okay. I'm going to switch the camera because I think this is going to work this time. Maybe. backwards. Hang on a second. Take off your socks and show feet. Well, John, it's not that kind of a room. I could make it one, but I don't think most people would appreciate it. So, I got this nice new setup, and I got the setup. I moved the laptop out of here, and I wasn't thinking about the fact that the keyboard was attached and it had illuminated keys. I usually don't have the light on because it gets way too warm. So, I managed to find this little thing, about $50. It's a nice Bluetooth, and it's a Mac keyboard, so it's got the same orientation and size that I've been working with for a while. And then the Sony MDR 7506 headphones. Oh, wait a minute. They've been pretty good. They're not like music headphones. They don't provide any bass or anything. It's a very flat sound. Morning, Sandy. All right. So that was the show and tell section part. What I'm going to do this morning is do about 15 minutes maybe of Finding Freedom. It's part of the Zion series. It's book 1. I actually did these about a year and a half ago, so they are out there on Audible. If you look up my name, Rick Barr, on Audible, you'll find it. Look up Finding Freedom or Zion and my name. You'll come up with them. So it's a trilogy with separate books. I might actually talk to the author about doing a box set because they're fairly short books. Hi, Lisa. Wait a minute. What's that? Who's frowning? Who's crying? Who put sad faces on there? That's not cool. All right. So this was a fun series, and she actually contacted me just a few weeks ago. We're going to start working on another book that she's written, and it's a little bit different. It's young adult, basically, and that's what this series is. So it deals with a girl. She's about 17. Stop that. Oh, okay. Wow, you're just crying all over the place. Good thing that doesn't impact me at all, my behavior or my mood. Weirdos. I haven't even messed up yet. So anyway, yeah, this is about a young girl who grows up in a religious cult, and she just starts seeing things are not great. There's more control than they should have. Stop it. So she convinces her parents to leave and her boyfriend, but they leave her brother behind. Or not really leave him behind, but he doesn't want to go. He's very dedicated to it. So the 3-book series deals with their departure and the aftermath of all that. So I'm just going to read a little bit for you. Chapter 3. The Blue-Eyed Boy. It had been 2 months since the day Katie and Patty had their talk with Kevin at the mill, and things had seemed to settle down again. Katie had apologized to Patty shortly after, even though she didn't really feel sorry, and Patty quickly accepted, glad to be putting all that mess in the past. Katie continued to pretend everything was fine. Patty would sit next to her in school and talk to her about her gardens and the new dress her mama was letting her sew by herself. To train me for when I get a soulmate, Patty told her excitedly. Katie would only pretend to listen. Although she seemed fine on the outside, she couldn't stop thinking about what she had learned. She silently questioned everything now. Why did all the females need to wait to eat? Why did they have to wear full-length gowns and have sleeves that went all the way down to their wrists, even in the sweltering heat of summer? What would be so bad about a girl's hair being loose? All these questions and more would occupy her mind throughout the day and keep her from falling asleep at night. The biggest question of all, why couldn't they pick their soulmates? What would happen if they did? As time went on and Katie grew older, she found herself thinking about these things more and more. The more she thought about these things, the more she felt the entire community didn't make sense. She started to focus more on what she knew and speculate on what she didn't. Certainly, there were more communities, she knew that. It wasn't even a question. There were people everywhere, and her father was friendly with some of the local farmers that brought in the lumber for the mill.
She knew the country was big. She knew about the different states, and that in each state there lived many different communities. She also knew that many of these communities were not like hers, which is why people would work so hard to join them. She had been taught as a very small youngling that the truth lay within the walls of Zion, and the other communities needed to remain separated from them because these people did not have the truth. But what does that mean? She wondered. If their community lived this way because they knew the truth, then how did the other communities live? Were they the opposite? Was every other community the same and living in direct opposition to Zion? Or was each community a little different from its sister community? There was so much she wanted to know, and Katie wasn't going to stop until she knew the truth. The real truth. Katie had just turned 14 when she began to notice more and more the boy with the deep blue eyes that sat on her right side at the school cabin. His name, she learned, was David Statler, and he was 1 year her senior. Patty had told her a while back that his family had chosen to be a part of Zion, the only one that did during Katie's lifetime. Her family had moved here when he was 7, and he had had a hard time making friends. He was always really quiet and kept to himself. She knew he was the reason she couldn't stop thinking about choosing your own soulmate. For months, every morning on the way to school, her stomach would fill with knots at the anticipation of seeing him. Patty, who was too wrapped up in her own life to ever fully notice anyone else, continued talking endlessly about pointless matters Katie couldn't follow. This went on every morning until Patty finally grew tired of Katie not being responsive enough to her babble and informed her that she would now walk to and from the schoolhouse with a different youngling, Rachel. Katie apologized for being selfish and respectfully said she understood why Patty needed to make this transition. But she was also secretly very grateful for the chance to be alone. She was so rarely alone since all her home time was spent with Michael and her mother that she was never able to truly focus her mind. She began praying, but not in the way she was taught. Katie was talking to God, silently in her head, asking him questions about Zion and the truth, and asking about David and her feelings. For some reason, she had this deep feeling that she was supposed to be connected to David in a way, though it didn't match up with anything she had ever been taught, and she couldn't explain it, even to herself. Each day, when Katie and David saw each other, they would blush and avert their eyes. Over the course of a few years, Katie would find more and more ways to be alone and talk with God. She would walk slower on her way home from school and offer to water the gardens each day. She and David were also spending more time together, although they needed to be careful, so the elders didn't suspect their feelings or wandering eyes. Katie's 15th birthday came and went, like so many others before it, a cold and rainy day in January, without a birthday cake or decorations. It was terribly cold, and the roads were covered with ice. Katie didn't seem to care much, as no one ever really paid attention to birthdays in Zion anyway, and Michael was too preoccupied thinking about his baptism celebration to care. Celebration to care. If anyone was ever excited to be baptized, it was Michael. Katie didn't think she had ever met anyone who loved and was as devoted to serving the Lord as her brother was. Birthdays in Zion were not celebrated, mostly because it was often taught and practiced that no one is better than anyone else, that God loved everyone equally, and we should never do anything to try to set ourselves apart from others. Most importantly, the Bible teaches that we are to esteem others higher than ourselves. And how would having a birthday celebration focused on just one person be keeping others in higher esteem? Katie felt tired and run down that day, not really sure why Michael was so excited when his baptism wouldn't be until June anyway, but she was trying to be happy for him. She loved God, too. She just felt that God was somehow different from what everyone seemed to think. She couldn't understand why God would care so much about wearing gowns or tightly braided hair, or why he would care if males and females sat together during a church service. The church building was an old, two-story stone house that had been long ago converted into the community's church building. It smelled heavily of mold and mildew, and the navy blue carpet squished under your feet when you walked. It was often difficult for the other members of the community to remain steady on their feet. They usually required some assistance from a younger adult in order to get into the main worship hall safely. Katie thought the church was a very dreary place. Everyone was so solemn whenever they were there. She didn't understand why people would actually be eager to go to a place like that. It gave her feelings she was ashamed of having. She felt that if this was what it meant to worship the Lord, she didn't want to do it. She struggled with this immensely. Talking was strictly forbidden once the piano music began to play. The chairs were old, rickety, wooden straight backs. The males sat on the right-hand side of the main worship hall, while the majority of the females sat on the left-hand side. There were several rows of chairs that had been set aside and placed against the back wall, reserved only for mothers with infants. This way, if an infant had a crying spell at any point during the service, the mother could slip out into the main hall without disturbing anyone. Katie hated coming to church. Each and every church service was at least a full 3 hours long, but it would be longer today because of the baptisms. She thought they were too long and agonizingly boring. Her back, shoulders, and neck were so tight and sore afterward from sitting so straight and still for all that time. Even though she looked and acted just like everyone else, she felt like an outcast. She felt like she was all alone, even in this stuffy, crowded room, surrounded by her brethren. She felt like she was the black sheep everyone knew about, but would never fully acknowledge. Except no one really knew how she felt inside. Katie could never keep her mind focused during church, and her mind always wandered. She felt like a bad Christian. If this is how I'm supposed to behave and feel happy and fulfilled, and I don't, does that mean I don't really love Christ at all? She thought to herself sadly. She shook her head slightly and dismissed these evil thoughts from her mind. She knew that couldn't be true. There was no way. It must be something else. The problem can't be me. She would share her thoughts with David later to see what he thought, how he felt about it all. But for now, she needed to try to put all these feelings aside. She was here for Michael. This was his day. It was so stuffy inside the worship hall, and the service just seemed to drag on. Katie got a bad headache halfway through from the deacon's yelling. He always yelled when he preached. Probably to force people to pay attention, she thought. Finally, the main service came to a close, and the piano music began to play. Everyone stood and, in unison, sang their closing chorus. They sat back down and waited for the younglings to file in for their baptism. During your baptism service, it was customary for you to sit on the benches in the hallway while the deacon preached. You sat there and listened intently to the preaching, and when the service ended, you were called in. The deacon, his wife, and his 2 sons made their way over to the very large wooden baptismal that sat along the far left wall of the room. Small steps were built onto the sides so people could climb in and out. All the younglings being baptized, 3 of them on this day, including Michael, who was first in line, filed into the main hall and stood in line at the baptismal. On this day, boomed the deacon, we celebrate an outward appearance and demonstration of these younglings' love for and obedience to the Lord. Michael stood on the steps proudly as the deacon's 2 sons pulled a large white curtain held by a metal rod around the baptismal. When given the signal, he climbed up over the last step and into the water. After he was settled and felt comfortable, Katie could hear the muffled voice of the deacon say, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost," as Michael's 5'11" frame was held under the water and quickly pulled up again. Water splashed onto the floor. There was no clapping allowed in the church building, so to show their happiness, all the members said, "Amen," in unison. The deacon took a towel from the stack his wife was holding next to him and handed it to Michael, who was now standing. It was only after he was fully wrapped in the towel and escorted out of the main worship hall and into the hallway that the next boy went over to wait his turn on the baptismal steps. In just a few moments' time, the baptisms were over, and everyone began filing outside onto the front churchyard for the celebration feast. Although Katie's mouth should have been watering at the thought of all the delicious food that awaited her, she didn't feel even remotely hungry. Katie was unsure of how she felt. She was happy for Michael because she knew this was what he wanted. But for some reason, it all just felt wrong to her. Alrighty. So that was just a little bit of chapter 3 there. And again, this is Finding Freedom, the Zion series, book 1. You can find it on Audible along with the 2 other books, Reunited and oh, that's good. Kind of brain dead. Let me look it up. Oh, it's yeah, at least it's Z-I-O-N. Sorry. No, the author, no, she's not from here. I don't think I've ever worked with anybody locally. Actually, it's they're all around the country. Next time I'll probably do one from a guy who lives in New Jersey. Wrote a really cool mob book. Hey Tim, thank you. So I'm trying to look this up. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank. So I'm just gonna hang out for a bit. If you have questions, let me know. I'll try to catch them all here. Nobody has questions except the bad ones from a certain couple of people. And you know, if you're interested in any of these, I have Heir of Zion is the third book, or book 2. Sorry. So it's Finding Freedom, Heir of Zion, and Reunited. Thanks, Lori. Smooth as silk. I don't have any silk in here. Okay. Well, let's see. What else is there to discuss? I've got some plans for other shows, just to get into other things. I'm incredibly busy with the audiobooks right now, and working on a couple for my pseudonym, and then I'm going to be working on the new book for Brittany Lewis. And then after that, I've got a new serial killer mystery kind of thing, which is it's going to be pretty cool. It's a shortish book, but I'm looking forward to getting started on it. So I'm pretty busy through the end of March. As soon as I have some time, I'm going to redo all my demos for 2019, and I want to kind of go through the process of that and how I produce those. So, all right, that's all I got. It really is. So thanks for tuning in. I'll get on here and read the comments and respond. And have a great day, folks.